My name is Isla Bennett, and I'm 29 years old. For most of my life, I've been called the quiet one, the little sister, the background player in a family full of big personalities. My parents run a successful tech business. My sister Vivian is the golden child, the CEO with a perfect wardrobe and sharper tongue. My brother Lucas is the charmer, always good at selling dreams. And me, I was the one who worked behind the scenes coding security systems, keeping our startup's data clean and safe. I was content with that. Or maybe I had just learned not to expect recognition. When I had ideas, they nodded but moved on. When I built things, they called it nice little tools. I stayed quiet, thinking one day they'd see. That day never came. Instead, the day that changed everything started with an accident. I had been working late in the server room, updating a critical back-end framework, when the ladder I stood on gave way. The next thing I remember is a ceiling of hospital lights and the slow realization that I couldn't move my right leg. They said I'd blacked out for hours. My collarbone was fractured, 2 ribs bruised, and my leg would need a brace for weeks. I stayed in the hospital for nearly 10 days. In that time, I assumed the company was running as usual. I trusted my family. I thought I could afford to rest. I thought wrong. The day I got home, I checked my work emails only to find I had been removed from every shared drive. I couldn't access any internal files, meeting records, or even my own admin dashboard. At first, I blamed the IT team. Then I checked my private accounts. The numbers didn't make sense. My shares were gone. 35% of the company, my equity just erased. I felt dizzy. I tried calling my sister. She didn't answer. I tried my dad. He said, "We'll talk later, sweetheart." That's when I knew something was wrong. Really wrong. 2 hours later, a former colleague, our old system admin, messaged me. "You didn't authorize the sale," he wrote. My chest tightened. "What sale?" I asked. He sent me a video file. It was grainy but clear. My father, mother, sister, and brother sat around the boardroom table. A stack of papers lay between them. Vivian flipped through the pages, then said, "She's in recovery. She doesn't need the stress of decision-making. Let's just get this done," my mother said quietly. "It's better for her long term." Lucas didn't say much, just nodded. Then my father said the words that made my stomach twist. "Isla's never been business-minded. She'll thank us for this eventually." Vivian picked up a pen and signed. Then she passed the papers to my father. One by one, they all signed. The camera's timestamp showed the meeting happened on the 3rd day of my hospital stay. I hadn't been conscious. I hadn't given permission. But the document said otherwise. Somehow they had my signature. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, breath shallow. I had built the encryption system that protected our company data. I had written the code, and they had used it all against me. When I was hospitalized due to a work accident, they sold all the shares of the company in my name. My father, mother, and even my most trusted sister signed papers in my name. I lost everything, but they didn't know I recorded everything. The morning after I watched that video, I sat in my apartment in complete silence. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The betrayal was too deep, too personal. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about control. It was about identity, about being erased by the very people who were supposed to protect me. I had built that company from the inside out. I had written its digital architecture, spent nights debugging code while they slept. I had sacrificed my weekends, skipped birthdays, lived on coffee and cold takeout just to get the system secure. And yet they decided I was expendable. Worse, they decided it without me. They didn't even give me the courtesy of pretending I mattered. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I opened the company's legal filing records, my hands trembling. It was all there. A transfer of 35% shares from Isla Bennett to Vivian Price, labeled as voluntary divestment due to health incapacity. Signed, stamped, notarized. The date, 4 days into my hospitalization. My medical records proved I was under sedation. There was no way I had signed anything. Yet there it was, my name, my handwriting down to the little loop I make at the end of my B. I remembered showing Vivian that flourish when we were kids. She used to tease me about it. Now she used it to forge a future. I tried calling her again. No answer. I sent a text. Nothing. I emailed my parents. My mother finally replied 3 hours later. Her message read, "Darling, we understand you're overwhelmed. Let's not make this into something dramatic. The company needed stability. You were hurt. It was a business decision." A business decision. That was the line. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a kind of quiet rage starting to curl in my stomach. I needed to know the full extent. I called Mark, our old IT manager, the one who had left 6 months ago after a disagreement with Vivian. He had nothing to lose and no reason to lie. "I didn't know how to reach you," he said. "I figured they'd told you. Told me what I asked, my voice like sandpaper. That they used your signature template. They had a scanned copy from an old tax document. I saw them upload it during a board session. I was supposed to delete the file after, but I didn't." He sent it to me. There it was. My signature lifted from a 2021 tax form. A perfect match. "This is illegal," I whispered. "It is," he said. "But Vivian, she made it sound like you were okay with it. She said you were stepping back for health reasons." "And you believed her?" I asked. "No," he said, after a pause. "That's why I saved the video. There was something else." He had logs, internal access logs from the day of the signing, IP addresses, login credentials, timestamps. It showed that someone had logged into the company's document system using my credentials from a device that wasn't mine. The IP, my parents' house. The device, my old laptop. The one I left at their place last Thanksgiving. My breath caught in my throat. They hadn't just forged my name, they had used my own tools against me, the software I built, the access I trusted them with. It was all premeditated, all calculated. Vivian was always good at appearances, at making herself the responsible one, the leader, the visionary. I used to admire her for that. Now I saw it for what it was, control masked as competence. And my parents. They followed her lead. Lucas, too. I thought we were building something together, but they were building it for themselves. I had just been the scaffolding. And when the structure was finished, they tore me down. That night, I barely slept. I lay on the couch, my leg in its brace, staring at the ceiling. The walls felt closer than usual, like they were leaning in, trying to suffocate me. My mind ran loops of every family dinner, every casual dismissal, every time someone said Isla's good with tech but not really cut out for leadership. I remembered once during a pitch meeting when I tried to speak, Vivian had smiled and said, "Let me take this, okay?" The investor nodded. I disappeared. Again. But not anymore. I wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to rebuild. And I would start with truth. The next morning, I called Riley. We hadn't spoken in years. We went to university together. He became a digital forensics investigator working mostly with white-collar crime. When he answered, I said I need help, and I need it discreetly. Riley didn't ask questions. He listened. He took notes. He said, "Send me everything you have, every file, every video, every timestamp." I did. And then I sat back and watched as he opened doors I didn't even know existed. He found access logs buried in the cloud. He pulled metadata from the forged signature files. He traced IP addresses to my parents' house and my sister's condo. He confirmed that the transactions occurred while I was under hospital care. And then he asked a question that changed everything. "Did you ever record board meetings?" I hesitated. Some I said. "Why?" "Because your security software, your code includes an auto backup feature, doesn't it? Especially when remote access is triggered." My eyes widened. "You think the system recorded them without anyone knowing? If it worked the way you built it?" "Yeah." We dove back into my server archives. There it was, a backup audio file labeled with a timestamp matching the board meeting where they voted to sell my shares. Riley cleaned up the SoundRAN filters. And then we heard it. Vivian's voice calm and cold. "Let's just process it while she's under. We'll file it as voluntary." Who's going to check my father? She never wanted control anyway. My mother. "It's what's best for the family." Lucas. "As long as she gets a payout, eventually what's the harm?" And then the silence. That chilling, knowing silence that settles when people agree to betrayal. I sat back, pulse pounding in my ears. They didn't just take what was mine. They planned it. Together. like I didn't even exist, like I was just a technicality they had to work around. But they made one mistake. They underestimated the system, and they underestimated me. After that recording, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused, sharp. The betrayal had carved something clean and cold through my chest, and I intended to use it. Riley and I started building a case, quietly, systematically. Every night we reviewed files, scrubbed metadata, traced logins. He showed me how to extract digital certificates from signed PDFs, how to pinpoint the exact moment my digital signature was inserted. It was clinical, technical, and devastating. The evidence stacked quickly. Riley mapped out a full timeline: the day of my accident, the hours of unconsciousness, the hospital's log of sedation meds. Then the boardroom meeting, the upload of the forged files, the IP addresses from my parents' home network. Vivian even used my old email to send a voluntary transfer confirmation to the company registrar. She never thought I'd trace it back. But I did. With Riley's help, we built a digital fortress of proof. It wasn't enough, though. Vivian was a master of spin. If I confronted her too soon, she'd twist the narrative. She'd cry, stress, blame miscommunication, maybe even gaslight the board. I couldn't afford that. I needed to get her comfortable, lower her guard. That's when I remembered something: the old holiday cabin. Every year my family hosted a summer gathering there. Food, drinks, stories. It was always Vivian's stage. I checked the calendar. Sure enough, the invite had gone out a week before my accident. I replied yes. Nobody responded. They weren't expecting me. Even better, Riley and I planned every detail. I'd show up quiet, low-key, play the recovering little sister. I'd act distant but not angry. Let them think I was too fragile to fight. We rented a nearby cabin as our base. Riley set up surveillance equipment, tiny pinhole cameras hidden in sunglasses, a backup recorder in my jacket seam, and a voice-activated mic tucked into the lining of a tote bag. It was extreme, maybe, but Vivian had rewritten my legacy. I wasn't leaving any room for denial. The day of the gathering, I wore soft colors, no makeup, a slight limp. My mother greeted me at the porch with a surprised smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're here," she said. "I didn't think you'd feel up to it." I smiled gently. Just wanted to see everyone. Inside, the living room was full of noise and wine. Vivian stood near the fireplace, laughing with two investors I didn't recognize. My father hovered by the grill. Lucas barely looked at me. It felt surreal, like I was watching a performance I used to be part of but was now locked out from. I made small talk, accepted a plate of food I barely touched, and waited. Eventually, Vivian found her way to me. She wore that polished grin, the one that always made people believe her. "You look well," she said. "Better than I expected." "Still recovering," I replied, but trying to be positive. "That's the spirit," she said, sipping from her glass. "We've all had to make tough choices lately." "I'm sure," I said softly. She leaned in slightly. "Isla, I know you probably feel like things happen too fast, but you'll see this IPO is the best thing that ever happened to the company, and ultimately to all of us." "I trust your judgment," I said. It wasn't a lie. I trusted her to act in her own best interest, no matter who got crushed. She smiled. "I'm glad you're starting to understand." Later that night, when the crowd thinned and the wine flowed heavier, I found her on the back porch with Lucas and one of the investors. Riley had warned me this would be the moment. To the future, she toasted, raising her glass. Lucas nodded. "Could have been messier," he said. "But you handled it clean." "Of course I did," Vivian said. "She practically handed it to us." The investor laughed. "She really signed off on it?" Vivian smirked. "Does it matter? Looks legit." The board believed it. SEC didn't blink. It's all about the story. My stomach turned, but I didn't flinch. She was bragging, confident, comfortable, the exact state we needed her in. "You're cold," the investor said, half admiring. "You rewrote history." "Some legacies are better rewritten," Vivian said. She was always the technical one, never the leader. I did what had to be done. Those words, "what had to be done," burned into me. I stayed 10 more minutes, then left quietly. Back at the cabin, Riley downloaded everything: audio, video, backup files. "You got her," he said. "We have voice, face, context, timeline. It's airtight." I stared at the screen. Vivian's face smiling in the porch light. "Not yet," I said. "Now we need to destroy the illusion, publicly." Riley nodded. "Then it's time for a family meeting." The next morning I drafted an email. Subject line: a conversation about trust. It was polite, brief, non-confrontational. I sent it to Vivian, Lucas, my parents, and the two key investors still involved in the company's transition. I invited them all to the lake house, said I wanted to talk, said I needed closure. I framed it as an emotional step toward family healing. I knew Vivian would be intrigued. She'd think I was broken, finally ready to surrender and acknowledge her version of the story. She replied in less than an hour. "We're all looking forward to it." The meeting was set for Saturday. Riley and I spent the days leading up to it prepping everything. We built a digital presentation timed every second. We printed legal affidavits. We pulled hospital timestamps and medical logs. Riley even hired a legal witness, an off-duty notary with law enforcement ties, to sit quietly in the background, disguised as a family friend. Saturday came fast. I arrived at the lake house just before noon. The weather was overcast, the lake still as glass. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Everyone was already there. My mother hovered near the kitchen, fidgeting with teacups. Lucas leaned against a window, scrolling his phone. My father sat in the corner, arms crossed. And Vivian was seated at the head of the long dining table, back straight, confident, prepared to moderate another chapter of her family dominance. "Isla," she greeted. "Glad you came." I nodded. "Thank you for being here." I moved to the table, opened my laptop, and connected it to the television mounted on the wall. Before we begin, I said, "I need you to understand this is not an accusation. It's a presentation of facts." My father sighed. "Isla, is this really necessary?" "Yes," I said. "It is." I clicked play. The screen lit up with the internal dashboard Riley had recreated: timestamp logs, IP addresses, access history. Each file showed my digital identity being used while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. I spoke calmly, clinically, just as I would at a technical review. "These are not assumptions. These are verifiable data points. This login occurred from my parents' IP. This PDF was uploaded from Vivian's condo Wi-Fi. The signature here was taken from a 2021 tax form. This access happened while I was sedated under hospital care, confirmed by my chart." I clicked to the next slide, an audio waveform. "This is from the board meeting on the 4th day of my hospitalization." I played the audio. Vivian's voice filled the room. "Let's just process it while she's under. We'll file it as voluntary." Who's going to check my father's voice? She never wanted control anyway. My mother, "It's what's best for the family." Lucas, "As long as she gets a payout eventually, what's the harm?" The room went silent. My mother's hand trembled slightly. Lucas looked down. Vivian's jaw clenched. I didn't give them time to recover. I advanced to the next clip, Vivian on the porch, glass in hand, bragging. "Some legacies are better rewritten." I did what had to be done. The investor in the room paled. My voice was steady. "You didn't just steal my shares. You stole my voice, my place, my future. And you did it thinking no one would question you. Because I'm the quiet one, the technical one, the little sister." Vivian finally spoke. "This is ridiculous. Out of context. You've been unstable since the accident. Everyone can see that. You forged my signature," I said. "That's not context. That's a crime." Riley stood then, revealing his presence. "And we have filed an official complaint with the SEC. Copies of these documents have been submitted to the Bureau of Corporate Compliance. Multiple violations are under review." Vivian froze. My father stood. "Isla, think about what you're doing. This will destroy the family." "No," I said. "You already did that. I'm just revealing it." My mother looked like she might faint. Lucas opened his mouth but said nothing. "You think this is revenge?" I continued. "It's not. It's restoration. You tried to erase me. You all sat there and decided I wasn't worth considering. But I was watching, and I remember everything." The room was dead silent. I looked at Vivian. "This company existed because I built its foundation. My code, my systems, my security layers. You branded it. You sold it. But you didn't make it. I did. Then I turned to the investor. Your IPO is now toxic. Every regulator will be alerted. Every shareholder will know. He nodded stiffly. Vivian's face twisted. You think this ends here? She hissed. You've just made enemies of everyone in this room. I leaned in. I don't need allies in this room. I brought the truth. That's all I need. The legal witness stepped forward, then speaking for the first time. I've documented everything presented here today. I will be submitting the summary report to the appropriate authorities. Vivian stood her chair, scraping loudly. You're pathetic, she snapped. You couldn't handle real leadership. You never could. Maybe I said, but I can handle justice. Then I unplugged the laptop, slid it into my bag, and walked out the door. Riley followed. Behind us, the house erupted into arguing. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Everything I needed had already been said. They had taken what was mine, and now I had taken it back. Not with screaming or threats, but with precision, with truth, with every line of code and every second of audio. They called me the incompetent little sister. Today they learned what I really was: relentless, calculated, and done being erased. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the cabin Riley had rented, staring at the ceiling as the silence settled in. There was no peace yet, only anticipation. Because the next move wasn't mine. It was theirs. I knew Vivian wouldn't go quietly. I knew my parents would scramble to preserve what was left of their reputations. And Lucas, he'd probably try to distance himself, pretend he was caught in the middle. But none of that mattered. The truth was already in motion. The next morning, the fallout began. The company's head of compliance resigned. 2 investors withdrew. My email pinged non-stop requests from journalists, quiet messages from employees who'd always suspected something was off. But I didn't respond. I had one more card to play, and I wanted it to land hard. I scheduled a final meeting this time, not at a house, not in secret. A formal gathering at a co-working space downtown. Riley arranged for a public notary and a corporate attorney to be present. We sent the invites with neutral wording, clarification of organizational roles, and ownership. I wanted them to think it was about reconciling. Vivian showed up in a sleek black blazer, her face composed but pale. Lucas arrived late, eyes bloodshot. My parents entered together, quieter than I'd ever seen them. I waited until they were seated before I walked in. I didn't greet them. I opened my laptop connected to the projector and displayed a single document on the screen. The real shareholder ledger, corrected and time-stamped. This, I said, is the version the SEC will recognize. My voice was calm, but beneath it ran a current of steel. These signatures here verified. This timestamp matches hospital sedation records. And this audio, I clicked to file. Vivian's voice echoed through the room. She practically handed it to us. I paused it. Except I didn't. And now neither will you. The attorney beside me stood. Based on the digital forensics provided and the affidavit sworn under oath, Ms. Isla Bennett is being reinstated as a principal shareholder with full voting rights and equity restored. Vivian's face contorted. You think this means you've won? She spat. You've ruined everything. The IPO is dead. The brand is tainted. Investors will scatter. They should, I said. They deserve better than a company built on forgery. Lucas finally spoke. I didn't sign anything. He muttered. You don't have proof I was involved. Riley tapped his tablet. Actually, we do. Your voice is on 3 separate recordings approving the transaction and discussing the forged documents. Lucas slumped back. My father shook his head, not at me, but at himself. My mother reached for his hand. We thought we were protecting the company, she said. We thought you wouldn't want to deal with the pressure. I stared at her. You didn't protect me. You erased me. Vivian stood. This isn't over. You're not strong enough to lead. You never were. I don't need to lead, I said. I just needed to take back what was mine. Then I turned to the notary. Please notarize the resolution for reinstatement. She did. It was quiet, unremarkable, but final. The attorney nodded. All documents will be filed today. Vivian's hands trembled. Lucas said nothing. My parents looked like they were aging by the minute, and I felt lighter, like I could finally breathe again. "You can go," I told them. "Your presence isn't required anymore." They left, not all at once, slowly, reluctantly, like people walking away from a fire they started but couldn't control. As the door closed behind them, I looked at Riley. "Thank you," I said. He smiled. "This wasn't about revenge," he said. "It was correction." "No," I said softly. "It was reclamation." The room emptied. I stayed. I sat in the chair at the head of the table, Vivian's old seat, and looked out the window. For the first time in years, I saw my reflection clearly. Not the little sister, not the overlooked coder, but the architect of her own justice. And this was only the beginning. 2 days later, it happened. I was at home sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the latest legal updates Riley had forwarded when the news alert popped up on my phone. Breaking Tech CEO Vivian Price under investigation for corporate fraud and forgery. My hands stilled. I clicked the link. The article detailed the entire saga, the forged signatures, the unauthorized share. Transfer the audio recordings. It mentioned my name once briefly as the original co-founder and whistleblower. That was enough. Within an hour, news vans were outside my apartment building. I didn't answer the door. I didn't need attention. I had gotten what I came for. By that evening, a knock came not from reporters, but from Serena, my mother. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. "Vivian's been arrested," she said without preamble. "The SEC filed charges. There's a federal investigation." I said nothing. "She's your sister," my mother whispered, as if that word could still mean something. I looked at her. She made her choices. So did all of you. She didn't argue. She just stood there like a woman who had finally run out of justifications. "We didn't think you'd fight back," she said quietly. I met her eyes. "I know." When she left, I closed the door and locked it. That night, the footage went viral. A shaky video of Vivian being led out of her office in handcuffs, her hair perfect, her jaw clenched. The caption read, "She tried to rewrite history. Now she faces the consequences." I watched it once, then I turned it off. There was no triumph in it, just the clean end of a dirty story. Vivian's empire crumbled over the next week. Investors pulled out, employees resigned, the IPO was canceled. Lucas issued a weak statement denying involvement, but nobody believed him. My father stayed silent. My mother disappeared from public view. And me. I kept working. Quietly. Steadily. Riley helped me finalize the documents to reclaim my equity. I hired 2 new developers. We started rebuilding from scratch a better version of the company, ethical, secure, transparent. I didn't care about headlines. I cared about building something no one could steal again. Not through paperwork, not through betrayal, not through family. Justice didn't roar. It arrived in court dates, signed affidavits, and frozen bank accounts. It wasn't loud, it was exact. And it was done. 3 months later, I returned to the lake house. Alone this time. The air was crisp, the trees beginning to change their colors, soft and golden. The house was quiet now, no laughter, no voices echoing through the hallways, no Vivian commanding attention from the living room sofa. I walked slowly through each room, not to reminisce, but to reclaim. I replaced the broken lock on the study door. I removed the outdated server Vivian had installed and rewired the system myself. I didn't need anyone's help, not anymore. In the living room, I placed a single framed photo on the mantel, me as a child sitting in front of my first computer, smiling shyly, while Vivian towered behind me, already posing for the spotlight. I stared at that photo for a long time. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the one who stayed up all night coding, the one who built the software that caught her family in their own lies, the one who fought back with facts, not fury. I was still here, and I wasn't small. I wasn't incompetent. I was the legacy they tried to erase. Riley visited a week later. He brought coffee and documents, finalized ownership transfers, the last legal step in restoring my name. "It's all yours," he said, sliding the folder across the kitchen island. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Then I walked out onto the porch and breathed in the cold lake air. It didn't taste like victory. It tasted like clarity. The next morning, I opened my laptop and wrote the first line of a new mission statement. We don't inherit legacy, we build it. I didn't need a press release. I didn't need revenge. I had something far more powerful: my story, my truth, my code. And this time no one would rewrite it but me.